The crystalline throne room of the Valtorian Empire sparkled with bioluminescent panels, casting an ethereal glow across the assembled engineers. 28 of the galaxy's finest minds stood in nervous clusters, their various appendages fidgeting with datapads and diagnostic tools. At the center of it all sat Empress Zarathix, her 4 eyes narrowing with barely contained frustration. 28 cycles, she hissed, her translator converting her native clicks into standard galactic common. 28 of you have examined my flagship, and yet the celestial dawn remains grounded. Explain. The lead engineer, a Corthan with 12 manipulator arms, stepped forward cautiously. Your radiance, the quantum drive matrix is unusual. The harmonics are beyond our current understanding. We believe it requires excuses. The Empress's tail slammed against the throne's armrest. I have conquered 17 star systems with that ship. Now it sits in my hangar like a decorative statue, and the greatest minds in my empire tell me they cannot comprehend their own technology? Emily stood at the back of the observation deck, her daughter's hand tucked safely in hers. At 12 years old, Sarah had seen enough diplomatic functions to know when to stay quiet. Emily's husband, Christopher, stood beside them, looking thoroughly out of place in his worn work jacket among the formally dressed assembly. Mom, Sarah whispered. Why are we even here? Ambassador protocol, Emily murmured back. When the Empress summons all human delegation members, we attend. Even the families. Christopher shifted uncomfortably, his calloused hands deep in his pockets. He'd spent the last 3 decades as a maintenance supervisor at the New Houston shipyards, and formal occasions made him itch. He squinted at the holographic display showing the Empress's ship, his eyes tracing the intricate web of conduits and power systems. That's not a quantum drive failure, he muttered. Emily glanced at him sharply. Chris, not now. I'm serious, Em. Look at the coolant flow pattern. The secondary heat exchanger is reversed. You can't possibly know that from 32 years fixing ships, honey. I know when someone installed something backward. On the throne platform, another engineer was attempting to explain the situation using complex mathematical formulas that floated in midair. The Empress's expression grew darker with each passing moment. Perhaps, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous purr, I should simply execute you all and start fresh with a new generation of engineers. The room fell silent. Several of the assembled engineers began to tremble. Christopher cleared his throat. Emily grabbed his arm, but he was already walking forward. Your Highness, he called out, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet chamber. Your Majesty. Ma'am? Every eye in the room turned toward him. The Empress's 4 eyes fixed on the human approaching her throne, dressed in casual work clothes and showing no sign of proper diplomatic fear. And who, the Empress asked slowly, are you? Christopher Hayes, ma'am. I'm with the human delegation. Well, technically, I'm just here because my wife works for the delegation. I fix ships back home. You fix ships. The Empress leaned forward. And you believe you can succeed? Where 28 Imperial engineers have failed? Can't say for sure without getting my hands on it, but I think someone installed your heat exchanger backward. See that coolant flow there? He pointed at the hologram. Should be going the other way. Probably happened during a retrofit. Easy mistake if you're used to older models. The lead Corthan engineer sputtered indignantly. Impossible. The heat exchanger was installed by certified technicians following exact specifications. Yeah, but specs change between ship classes, Christopher interrupted, scratching his chin. I'm guessing this ship got upgraded from a Mark IV to a Mark VI system about 5 years ago? The Empress's eyes widened fractionally. 4 years. 7 cycles. There you go. Mark VI uses a reverse flow coolant system. Efficiency. Improvement. But if your techs were trained on Mark IV systems and didn't check the updated manual. He shrugged. Heat builds up in the wrong chamber. Quantum matrix can't maintain stable resonance. Drive won't initialize. Seen it 100 times. The throne room was utterly silent. If you're so good, the Empress said softly, dangerously. Fix my ship. Christopher blinked. Right now? Right now? Right now. Okay, sure. He looked back at Emily, who had her face in her hands. Can I borrow some tools? 7. 2 hours later, Christopher emerged from the Celestial Dawn's engine compartment, covered in coolant residue and quantum lubricant. The Empress stood in the hangar with her arms crossed, surrounded by the 28 engineers who had been working on the problem for weeks. Well? She demanded. Try it now, Christopher said, wiping his hands on a rag. The Empress gestured to her ship's captain. The Celestial Dawn's engines hummed to life, building to a steady, powerful thrum that resonated through the hangar deck. The quantum drive matrix glowed with perfect, stable harmonics. The engineers stared in collective disbelief. You reversed the heat exchanger, the Corthan engineer said faintly, and recalibrated the flow regulators. Yeah. Also, your plasma injectors needed cleaning. When's the last time you serviced those? There was carbon buildup everywhere. The Empress approached Christopher slowly. He stood his ground, though Emily noticed his hand trembling slightly at his side. Human, the Empress said. You have accomplished in 2 hours what my empire's finest could not achieve in 28 cycles. Just needed someone who's actually turned a wrench before, ma'am. A strange sound emerged from the Empress, a series of clicking chirps that her translator rendered as laughter. Indeed. Name your reward. Christopher Hayes of Earth. Christopher glanced at his wife and daughter, then back at the Empress. Well, I was supposed to retire next year. But if you've got other ships that need fixing, I'd be happy to take a look. Retirement's boring anyway. The Empress's eyes gleamed with amusement. I believe we can arrange that. However, there is one condition. What's that? You must teach my engineers how to properly read a maintenance manual. As Christopher was escorted away by a now very respectful group of Imperial engineers, Emily shook her head in amazement. Sarah tugged on her mother's sleeve. Is Dad going to be famous now? Emily watched her husband gesturing animatedly at a hologram, already deep in technical discussion. Knowing your father, he'll just call it another day's work. But across the galaxy, the story would spread of the human who fixed what the Empire's best could not, armed with nothing but experience, common sense, and a willingness to get his hands dirty. Sometimes, the most advanced civilizations needed reminding. There was no substitute for practical knowledge. The end.